What was the most downloaded app in 2021? And what does that mean for the future? We're going to talk about that and a bunch of other trends in this week's episode, so stay tuned. Welcome to a new episode of This Week in Apps. I'm Ariel from Appfigures, and I have 5 highlights for you this week. And we got a big trend that we're going to look at, but let's start by looking at the most downloaded apps in 2021. We'll talk about trends in just a little bit. 2021 was a pretty intriguing year in mobile. I think it's hard to disagree with that. And you can see it from the numbers. TikTok was the #1 most downloaded app in 2021 with 586 million new downloads. That's more than 500 million downloads in 2021. Instagram was right behind it with 566 million downloads, again more than 500 million. The rivalry between them and the fact that both of them are 1 and 2 tells the story of 2021 and gives us a hint of what's to come in 2022. And if you are not sure what I'm talking about creators. We'll get to that in a second. Facebook and WhatsApp rounded out the Meta trio in spots 3 and 4, and we can see that Meta is actually really strong on mobile still. As we dip lower, we have Telegram, which had a magnificent year. It added 365 million new users in 2021. It had a little bit of help in January, if you remember, from WhatsApp that fumbled an update to its privacy policy, but it's still holding strong now that that's no longer the case. Snapchat, Messenger, Zoom, CapCut, and Google Meet finished the top 10 list. Do you see the pattern here? There's a very obvious pattern. 5 of the top 10 apps have something to do with creators. In the case of CapCut, TikTok's video editing app, it's really only about creators. YouTube, the original home for creators, isn't on the list, but that's only because it comes built on Android, so we don't count those downloads in our estimates, and we can't really rank it because we don't have any visibility into that. If we could, I'm sure it would be #2 on that list, and if you look a little bit to the left, you'll see that on the App Store, it is #2. I've covered creators and the revenue they earn a bunch of times this year, and I really expect that to be the hottest trend for 2022. TikTok and Twitch already have ways for creators to monetize. YouTube Shorts pays creators from its fund, and Twitter super follows are now finally taking off. I talked about that last week. I think that's going to be the biggest trend in 2022, and I have more highlights that make that argument even stronger. But I have a question for you. Are app developers considered creators? I wasn't sure for myself, so I asked Twitter, and the results were split down the middle, so that didn't help. Tell me what you think. Leave a comment and tell me if you think app and game developers are considered creators or not, and why. Next up, let's talk about Twitter. Although Twitter didn't make the most downloaded list, it did have a really good 2021. In fact, it had a great November and October, where it hit the highest number of downloads in a long time. For all the talk of TikTok and Instagram, seeing Twitter grow is an interesting change of pace. Downloads in November hit 17.3 million according to our estimates, and that's across the iOS app, the Android app, and the Lite Android app. And the Lite version of Twitter, which is only available for Android, has contributed a small but I would say decent number of downloads. It too grew significantly over the last few months. In fact, a good chunk of Twitter's growth has been on the Android side of things, which accounts for roughly 72% of all new downloads in 2021. Twitter's previous best month of downloads was October, with 16.8 million downloads, but the peak before that requires looking all the way back to April of 2020. Twitter has been through a lot and has changed a lot, and it's really unlike any of the existing platforms that it's competing with these days. The evolution, which I initially thought would hurt it, doesn't seem to be. It'll take some time, but Twitter does have everything it needs to remain an active contender in the race for content and creators. And that's a good thing. Next, let's talk about Reddit. Reddit had a magnificent month in November. Although Reddit has been around for what feels like forever, it has become a household name over the last couple of years. Things like the GameStonk ordeal from January have made it into a destination for mere mortals. Reddit hit a new milestone in November. It made the most revenue in a single month ever in its app's entire money-making existence. Net revenue rose to $546,000 in November, a 43% increase over January, and 470% increase over January of 2019. We estimate Reddit's net revenue to hit $5.5 million in 2021. I think it's good enough for them to have filed for an IPO. We're still talking chump change in comparison to Twitch, which has a very similar revenue model for creators. But it's not just about the money. The money is nice, but it continues to reinforce the trend that I'm talking about, and that is creators making money. The good news here is that a creator at this point can create in a variety of ways. It can be short videos on TikTok, game streaming on Twitch, it can be long videos on YouTube, it can be a whole variety of other things. And with Reddit and Twitter being able to offer these tools, now there are ways that don't include the video. So if you want to create, there are a ton of different opportunities for you to do that. And in 2022, I think we'll see all of those take off. Now, let's put trends on hold for a moment and talk about something that kind of just happened. AirTags have become very popular. They stole the thunder from Tile and others like Tile that existed out there because the Discovery Network, meaning all the people with iPhones out there, is just second to none. They've become so popular that Apple did something that it's very reluctant to do. It made using AirTags possible on Android. In its first week on Google Play, Apple's mostly brandless Tracker Detect app was downloaded 68,000 times globally. The US was responsible for about 37% of those downloads, followed by Germany, Russia, the UK, and Canada. But the list stretched fairly long, where we see a handful of downloads from even Bulgaria and Romania. So everyone really likes AirTags, even on Android. But much like Apple Music and Apple TV, both of which are Apple-first apps that have made their way into the Android ecosystem because Apple wants market share more than device sales, Tracker Detect is now another tool in Apple's growing arsenal of products that don't rely on an iDevice. By this logic, I fully expect to see a standalone Android app to manage the HomePod, and I expect to see that coming out very soon. If you remember a few months ago, I talked about how the HomePod stole last Christmas from Amazon and from Google, and I think it's going to do it again this year. Last for this week, if we think about popular things and we want to roll back about a year, in 2020, Apple released iOS 14 and with it widgets, which were the hottest feature for the rest of 2020. A few apps were born to offer widgets and a ton of apps added widgets, but one came out kind of the undoubtful winner. That's Widgetsmith, the app that became the way to add custom widgets pretty much overnight. And I looked at it last year when that happened, and I'm going to link to that in case you want to see those numbers. But a year later, I was curious to see whether it's still successful. To do that, I am going to look at revenue estimates because downloads are nice, but money is really what it's all about, especially because it's a subscription app. And I want to see if paying subscribers actually continued their original subscription. The simple answer is yes. Based on the numbers, it's still earning money. Cumulative net revenue since the app was released hit 3 million this month. It got to 2 million back in June and earned its first million of net revenue back in December of 2020, according to our estimates. So the pace definitely slowed down quite a bit, but it's still looking pretty healthy, all things considered. And I love seeing the success of Widgetsmith because it wasn't made by some big name company with a huge marketing budget. It was developed by an indie developer who was just at the right place at the right time and knew what to build. And I think that's a very important key to this whole thing. And the question I have for you is, are you keeping an eye out for opportunities? I am working on a guide on how to find opportunities. Once I have that, I'll share it. And that's all I have for you this week. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments and I'll be sure to answer them. Otherwise, I'll see you next week.